in that they are the proud survivors of more than 200 years of dispossession. Council reiterates its commitment to address disadvantages and attain justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of this community. Almighty God, we humbly ask you to bless this meeting, direct and prosper our deliberations, the advancement of your glory and the true welfare of the people of Newcastle. Ladies and gentlemen, will you honour the memories of those who have served and died that we might meet here in peace? Thank you, councillors. Councillors, I have received apologies and a request for leave of absence from the Lord Mayor, Councillor Nelms. Given everybody else is in attendance, could I ask for a motion for apologies? Moved by Councillor Luke, seconded by Councillor Winnie Bartz. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, I declare the motion carried. The first item on the public voice agenda this evening is DA 2020-00181 for 35 Warrabrook Boulevard and 6 Haker Place, Warrabrook. Councillors, we've got presentations this evening from 2 objectors as well as representatives from the applicant. Could I ask Councillor Services to admit Ms. Alison Monkley, Mr. Scott Pearce, Mr. Tom Jorgensen and Ms. Rebecca Johnson to the meeting to present to Council. We'll run this session in the same way that we do our normal public voice presentations. And so I'd ask first that we have 10 minutes to hear from the 2 objectors and then 10 minutes to hear from the DA applicant, followed by the opportunity for questions from councillors. It looks like everybody has been admitted to the meeting, so I'll just take a moment to welcome everyone and see them connected, and then hand over to Ms. Monkley and Mr. Pearce to give their presentations to Council. Apologies, just while that occurs, councillors, just looking in the chat, I did miss something important. Before we proceed with this presentation, could I just ask, are there any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests just for the public voice agenda? No one is raising their hand, so we'll progress with the presentations to Ms. Monkley and Mr. Pearce, please. It looks like you might be on mute.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Now, I believe that there's a presentation going to be shown from us. Is that coming up? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Deputy Mayor and councillors, thank you for tonight. My name's Alison Monkley and I'm joined here with Scott Pearce, and we're presenting the Warrabrook community's concerns and objections to the proposed pet crematorium at Warrabrook. We have a number of objections and we ask you, or basically we are going to present our key objections tonight. We do have a number of objections that we just can't present in the 10 minutes time slot for tonight. And we ask you to look at our submissions paper, which we have attached to this presentation. Now, both Scott and I are residents of Warrabrook. We live in Coachwood Drive near this proposed facility. I've got a background in environmental engineering and over 18 years consultancy experience. And Scott has a background in civil engineering and project management with over 6 years in planning and design of major infrastructure projects. If we go to the next slide. Okay, site location. So as you can see by the photographs, this site is located close, really close to the residents of Warrabrook. It's located on the backyard boundary of the Coachwood Drive residents and within 25 minutes from the front yard of the Haker Place residents. This is very close and no other pet crematorium in New South Wales is located this close to residents. And interestingly, the guidelines for crematoriums actually state that ideally there needs to be a buffer between residents, which is generally around 100, but ideally 200 metres. So this is definitely not within that buffer. It's not in keeping with other developments. You could argue that the residents have bought houses near a piece of land that is zoned light industrial, which crematoriums are permissible under that zoning. However, I don't think it's reasonable for them to understand that, given the types of development that is occurring in the area. There's a lot of commercial type developments and light manufacturing, but nothing of an industrial nature that emits emissions. Next slide, please. The SEE doesn't consider section 5.3 of the LEP, which basically talks about developments of conflicting nature on zone boundary properties. And it talks about the need for flexibility of conflicting zones, conflicting developments and zones, and talks about the need for a more appropriate consideration and logical consideration for developments of this nature. It doesn't meet the strategic directives of the light industrial zoning under the LPS, and that means light in nature. It means that they will not cause nuisance or adversely affect the surrounding amenity by way of noise or emissions. Also, it notes that industrial areas are to minimise impact to neighbouring residents or other sensitive uses by developing buffer zones of low impact industrial use, and this development doesn't have an adequate buffer. Next slide, please. The residents are extremely concerned about the health and air quality impacts that this development will have. We've got a number of residents in the area that either have reduced lung function or are recovering from cancer. The SEE notes that the pet crematorium has the ability to impact on air quality at the site. And it's also noted in the air quality report that there's up to 19 different types of contaminants, most of them which are carcinogenic, that will be emitted from this proposal. It will generate harmful emissions, including the PM2.5 and PM10. These are really important because they are easily breathed into your lungs and they get deep into your lungs, which can cause heart and lung disease. Canada's Interior Health Authority concluded that fumes from crematoriums are potentially harmful and that they should not be located close to residential areas. Also, we should note that there's no formal standards or regulations for the operation of pet crematoriums. So who is going to regulate and ensure that they are burning and operating correctly? The SEE hasn't considered the requirements for environmental protection licence under the POEO Act. It's basing the loading on an estimate rather than the actual maximum loading capacity of the equipment, which if we look at it over the operation over a year under their 10-hour days, over 5 days a week, excluding public holidays, it's over 200 tonnes a year, which means that it does trigger the requirement for environmental protection licence. Next slide, please. We have a number of issues with the air quality report. We consider it inadequate. It is far too general in terms of looking at topography, other influences such as dust from other environments, the coal loading, the trains. It also doesn't take into consideration low-lying areas and downdrafts where contaminants can accumulate, particularly on the Coachwood Drive side. It is quite low in that area. It doesn't assess odours or nuisance dust. And the modelling is based on an annual average wind direction over a 24-hour period. Now, we all know the wind does not blow every day in a northwesterly direction. It changes based on seasons and times of the day. And we really require further modelling of this to consider seasonal changes as well as hourly impacts. This modelling's been done over a 24-hour period, not the 10-hour operational period. So essentially, they've diluted the results. And if you look at the diagram in the top corner there, that exceedance is of the PM2.5, which is assessment criteria of 8. And if you look at the contours, it's 7.8 and 7.6 over the residents. There's not a lot of wriggle room there for the exceedance criteria, and it actually excludes background. So it's assuming PM2.5 is 0 in this area, and that's not the case. And if you look down below the diagram, that's nitrogen dioxide, and the concentrations again are exceeding, and it's actually creeping over the boundary of that site. So again, we need some better modelling to confirm what's happening with this operation. The operation management plan, which was submitted later after the development application, requires the operator to visually monitor the condition. So it's not council, it's not the EPA, it's up to the operator. So there are concerns there. Who's going to note when things go wrong? And also the OMP does not include testing of PM2.5 and PM10, which are the key contaminants that we are concerned about. Next slide, please. The SEE neglects to consider the visual impacts of the development. It has a throwaway statement in there saying that it won't be obvious from Hakea Place. Well, as you can see in the top figure, it will be visible from Hakea Place. It will be visible from Coachwood Drive, and it will be visible from Eucalyptus Circuit. It is not attractive in the context of the local environment and comparing it to other developments in the area, and it hasn't adequately assessed the visual impact from the stack itself and emissions caused from heat haze, as well as dust emissions. And if you look at the diagram below, this talks about smoke opacity levels. So it gives you an idea of what it will look like on a clear blue day. Now, the air quality report has actually stated that the council should put in a condition that it shouldn't emit any more than 20% over 20% for 5 minutes over an hour, or 20% for 20 minutes over 24-hour period. So that means essentially, because it's an average, we could be looking at 50% plus opacity levels occurring at this site at any one time. Next slide, please. As we mentioned before, the development does not meet the LPS strategic directions for the zoning. It will be unpleasant and undesirable for the Warrabrook residents. We have to go past this site every day. It's going to be distressing for residents. We're going to be seeing it. It's visible. It's going to have a negative impact on livability through the increased dust and odour emissions and overall reduction in the quality of environment and our health. It's not going to be an attractive place to live anymore in the Warrabrook area. It's normally a lovely place, as you can see by the photographs below, and used by the community. We don't believe that it will be, or we believe it will be unpleasant because of the visual impacts from the stack as well as the emissions. Next slide, please.
Just before you start on that next slide, just a time warning. We're about 8 minutes into the 10-minute block for both yourself and Mr. Pearce. I just wanted to...
That's fine. I've only got 2 slides to go, so no all problem. Good. So public interest. Well, the SEE would say that it is in the public interest, but we're so far to date have had 140 submissions objecting the development, so I doubt it is in the public interest. The SEE also says there is a need because, to the best of their knowledge, there is no crematorium for pets in the local government area. This is incorrect. A simple search of the yellow pages will show you that there's one at Beresfield, which is located in the LGA. There are 5 other services that service Newcastle, as well. So we don't believe there is a need for an additional pet crematorium. As we mentioned before, it doesn't meet the values of the DCP, which will strengthen social connectivity of the community. The SEE also says it will have a positive employment benefit for the community. It won't. It's only got 3 to 6 people this place will employ. And actually, in fact, the solar panel manufacturer that it's going to replace employs 19 people. And in addition to that, the other part of the site is used as a car park for business supporting 35 people. So it's going to have a net deficit in employment. It's not in keeping with Council's aims to be a smart, livable, sustainable city. And it's not in Council's objectives to improve air quality through the reduction of emissions. It'll be undesirable and unpleasant for those that live near it, and no consultation to the community has been done to date. Next slide, please. So overall, the Warrabrook community is unified in agreement that this DA should not be granted consent. And we'd ask, would you be comfortable to have an unregulated crematorium burning daily less than 25 metres from your home? Warrabrook community thanks you for your time and place its trust in you to make the right decision for the residents, which is not to grant consent to this DA. Thank you everyone for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions after the next meeting.
Thank you very much, Ms. Monkley. Appreciate your presentation. I now then might move to hear from presentations from the DA applicants. So we've got Tom Jorgensen from Pet Angel and Rebecca Johnson from Bar Property and Planning to present.
Good evening. Can you see me?
Yes, thank you.
Good evening, Deputy Lord Mayor and councillors. My name's Tom Jorgensen. I'll thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking to you from our Gold Coast crematorium. Along with my nephews, two nephews, we started Pet Angel 6 years ago. We're all pet owners, or in between us, actually, we've got 6 dogs. Bad personal experience for myself with my previous dog, and the fact that I learnt that most pets actually end up in a plastic bag in the dump upset me to the extent where that I travelled to the USA and investigated pet cremators. I bought pet cremators from a reputable pet cremation company. In fact, it's one of the largest cremators in the USA. Our facilities in Brisbane and the Gold Coast are modern. They're very modern facilities. We've spent a lot on the fit out. They're very, very nice. And we have now been operating for 6 years, as I said. Pet ownership has gone through the roof. Humanisation of pets has happened, where in other words, they're treated as a family member instead of a pet. And dogs are now costing up to $10,000, many over $4,000. People are expecting a higher level of service, and that's what we provide. Look, I fully understand the concerns of the residents. After all, that's exactly what I've heard for our previous 2 DA applications on the Gold Coast and Brisbane, and we overcame them. We've now been operating for, as I say, 6 years. We have never had a complaint. We have never had a smell. We've never had a smoke, and we have no noise. In fact, we have a dance school next to us on the Gold Coast, and in Brisbane, we've got a cafe across the road with outdoor seating. They actually objected, and subsequently to that, they've apologised and wished they hadn't, because they don't even know we're there. These cremators aren't incinerators. These are proper pet cremators. They're designed to get rid of emissions as much as possible. Now, on the Gold Coast has got around, I can't speak for Newcastle because I tried to get the figures, but the Gold Coast has got around about 70,000 registered dogs, and unregistered dogs and cats take that to about 140,000. I expect Newcastle would be slightly less than that because the population is slightly less. The 3 crematoriums that service the Gold Coast only cremate 20,000. So that means that if there was 100,000 pets 12 years ago, 100,000 died last year. That means 80,000 went to a tip in a plastic bag. Now, I've exhumed pets, let me tell you, and a pet that's in a sealed plastic bag is not a pretty sight after 5 years. So I consider we're actually providing a good service. Now, Newcastle is a dynamic and fast-growing city, and it needs a higher level of service. I know the operators down there. We're completely different to them. You've got a huge amount of units being built, a lot of people living in units with pets. You've got small blocks. People can no longer bury their pets. This puts pressure on council-run landfills. That's why councils love this kind of service. Gold Coast and us, we have a very, very good relationship. I note that one of the concerns was that pets have dumped at our gate. In 6 years, we've never had a pet dumped at our gate. Just let me recap. No smell, smoke, or noise. Fast food outlets, such have many times our emissions. We have virtually no vehicle movements. Our vehicles go out in the morning, they may return 5 times. And initially there was only 2 vehicles. So we're talking about 20 movements. We're good for the environment, less plastic bags going to the tip, and we're good, clean, responsible neighbours employing local staff, and we contribute a lot to the welfare of pets, especially through animal rescue facilities. And if anybody has any concerns, jump on Facebook and check our star rating. It's 5-star, and we've got 10,500 followers. Thank you.
I might just jump in. There are some slides that I'd like to present as well, just to step the councillors through some of the pivotal aspects of the application. Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. you've heard from Tom, who's the owner and director of the business and the proponent of the application. I'd like to just step you through some of the aspects of the site. The site is within the industrial precinct of Warrabrook, and as the residents did alert to, it is at the boundary of the residential and industrial precinct. However, I would like to say that this is probably one of the best designed industrial sites in terms of providing buffers to residential premises. Hakea Place, which is the small road opposite on the northwestern boundary, provides a 30-metre buffer boundary to boundary. Within the site itself, there is a 2-metre high, 5-metre wide vegetated earth mound, which completely screens the development from the residential area. This, as well as the rear retaining wall, is topped by a 2-metre acoustic fence. Now, the site is zoned light industrial IN2, and it's important to note here that a crematoria is not a heavy industry, and it is a permissible land use within the zone. Now, the zone objectives are concerned with providing for a wide range of light industrial, warehousing and related land uses. It supports employment opportunities, and it's about making use of the existing industrial land for industrial uses. Next slide, please. So this application is simply moving from one type of light industrial use to another type of light industrial use. The building is existing, so minor internal works are proposed and some external works, some external cladding to simply smarten up the building are proposed. Otherwise, it is exactly the same development that already exists. This will be a domestic scale operation, so the facility will handle the cremation of small animals, the majority being domestic pets. The proposal is for the installation of one cremator. That cremator will have primary and secondary chambers. The primary chamber operates at about 1,000 degrees, and the purpose then of the secondary chamber, which operates at 850 degrees, is designed to incinerate any smoke or odour that is carried through from that primary chamber. Now, these temperatures are set by the EPA for these types of machines. Now, the facility will operate a pickup service only, where deceased animals are transported to the site by the proponent. There is no public delivery and there is no drop-off. The facility will not hold memorial services or public gatherings. It will employ 6 staff. Now, it's important to remember this is a new business for Newcastle, so that is 6 new additional jobs for the local economy, and these include drivers, technicians and office staff. The office will operate Monday to Saturday, and importantly, the cremator will only operate Monday to Friday. And importantly, the facility won't generate any biological or chemical waste. The only waste generated will be general office waste, paper and some plastic containers that hold chemicals for cleaning. Next slide, please. So I've just included a photograph here of the inside of a typical workshop for a facility like this. As you can see, it's very clinical, it's sterile, and it's proposed to be operated at the highest standards. The cremator itself is a modern new system with inbuilt emissions control systems. And as the residents have stated, the application has been supported by an air quality assessment report prepared by a qualified individual and assessed by council officers, and an air quality management plan. That assessment has been prepared in accordance with the New South Wales EPA modelling guidelines, and including a level 2 assessment that was done specifically for and using a specific site-based model for the assessment of PM 2.5 and PM 10. And that report has found that the emissions will be compliant with the criteria. Next slide. Lastly, I just want to draw our attention back to the requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. And that requires a consent authority to balance both the environmental impacts as well as the social and economic impacts. Now, this is a permissible use with development consent of council, who is the regulator, and is consistent with the zone objective. The proposal complies with all the relevant requirements of Newcastle's DCP. It has been made in accordance with the requirements of the EPA, which includes public exhibition, the likely impacts, including the environmental impacts on air quality, but also acoustic impacts, traffic impacts, and amenity have been assessed. Given that it's an established industrial site with constructed buffers to the adjoining uses, it's considered to be a site that is suitable for this development. And the fact that this facility will provide for a critical waste management service for the locality, for the disposal of animals. It will create employment in the way of 6 new jobs. It's considered to be in the public interest. So having satisfied the matters related to the requirements of the EP&A Act, we're therefore seeking Council's support for the approval of this application. So we're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I might invite back the 2 objector representatives so that councillors are able to ask questions of both the applicant and the objectors, and request that councillors raise their hand via the chat. I might start questions of myself, if that's okay. And that was just a quick question in respect to the capacity of the facility. So I understand from the background we've been provided that there's 3 chambers that can be operating simultaneously. You've obviously got relatively long daily operational hours, and it would appear that you're getting close to that 200 tonnes of waste per year threshold based on the average pet size that's been included in the background documents. I just wanted to understand how close to that threshold the facility would be, and why it is that you're not considering seeking an EPL from the EPA as part of the approval process.
So I can answer the EPL question. So it's simply not required. So I think the tonnage was around, the threshold is about 200 for the requirement for an EPA, and if an environmental protection licence is not required, it's council who is the regulator. And so the council have the opportunity to condition the application to manage all of the impacts that would otherwise be managed through an EPL up until that 200 kilo threshold. I might ask Tom to maybe provide some more details around how the cremator works and the chambers.
Look, the cremator is basically rated at X number of kilos per hour. If you overload a cremator, in other words, if you put too much material in there by way of weight, one of 2 things happens. The machine, if it has what's called an opacity monitor that shines through the stack. If it senses any smoke at all in the secondary chamber, it simply shuts down the primary chambers. So you cannot overload or cremate any more than the machine will handle, because it simply shuts down. So you start up, you shut down. You start up, you shut down. So you have to manage your loadings. I know this sounds very mechanical, but that's how it is. We have to carefully manage our loadings. And from memory, I think this machine is rated at 150 kilos maximum per hour. From memory. I could check that.
If you could, on notice, that would be terrific. A quick follow-up question and a technical one. What fuel does the incinerator utilise?
Natural gas.
Okay.
And we will be installing solar panels on the roof to try and offset some of our emissions.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions from councillors, so I'll hand over to Councillor Church.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. My question is to the applicant. One of the main concerns from residents is that the emissions are largely unregulated or unpoliced by an external body. You know, it's a self-regulating model. Could you answer and respond to that criticism, please?
Well, I can only respond that we've been operating for 6 years and we've never had a complaint. Look, we're operating machinery. Machinery can break down, and I'm not the first to admit that. But look, our equipment has never, ever broken down. You can stand in the crematorium itself and you actually can't smell anything. We get all you can see coming out of the stack. Look, I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, but all you can see coming out of the stack is heat haze. That's all you can see. Now, sorry?
I might just add that the statement that it's unregulated is untrue. So the air quality assessment report has been prepared in accordance with the approved methods for modelling and assessment of air pollutants for New South Wales by the EPA. Council is the regulator. That report found that of the 19 pollutants that the residents alluded to, the emissions meet and satisfy that criteria from those modelling guidelines.
So thank you, good answer. Is there someone within council who can perhaps inform councillors how we will conduct our role as regulator?
Ms. Bisson, if she's on the call. Coming into focus, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, councillors. I was just trying to find my mute and video. We will be able to detail how that comes into play within the report. The assessment report and the assessment of the application is not completed as yet. However, as a regulator, you know, if we received complaints, we would be able to go out and investigate those complaints and ask for evidence, like we do with other regulatory investigations that we carry out.
So there wouldn't be any ongoing monitoring, it's only on complaint, is that correct?
That's correct. We're not required to go out and do ongoing monitoring.
Do you concede that that might give rise to some issues for the residents?
There's probably numerous developments in the city that residents may have concerns with from a mountain of reasons, with traffic or environmental and the like. We wouldn't go and monitor them all individually. We would respond to them by complaints.
Thank you. And one other question just to the applicant. The other issue is proximity to homes. 25 metres was the claim by residents. That seems very close. Have you explored other sites in Newcastle that might be more suitable in a more intensive industrial zoning?
We have. We found flooding was an issue. This is well above the flood zone. We've investigated, I think this is number 3 or 4. There were contaminated field site we looked at. This site is, it ticks the boxes. I mean, I don't know how to prove we're going to be good neighbours, except we will be good neighbours. People will not have the problems or concerns that they think they have.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Councillor Clausen. Alison, I just had a question for you. During your presentation, you mentioned that a buffer of 100 metres, but ideally 200 metres was recommended. Where did that come from? What is that like in a? I just missed where that the origin of that buffer was.
Yeah, so that comes from the guidelines for crematoriums. So
Right.
There is a guideline that says, and I'm just getting the exact quote. Yeah, so it's environmental guidelines for crematoria and cremators, and that
Right.
is. Yep.
No, thank you. Apologies if you said that. I just missed that during your presentation.
No worries.
Thanks, Alison.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie. Apologies. Councillor Elliott. Sorry, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thanks for your indulgence, Councillor Mackenzie. I was just wanting to refer to the query that Councillor Church made and check something with Ms Bisson, if I may. Is it correct that as a consent condition, we could require the applicant to actually have some sort of real-time data logging or monitoring of air quality that could then be kept and provided if there is any complaint? It's very difficult if you get a complaint to be able to demonstrate any compliance or exceedance unless you've got real-time monitoring on the facility. And I don't know whether that's a condition that we can impose as a regulator. I expect we could. And secondly, would that, Ms Monkley, would that give residents more comfort if they knew that there was monitoring of emissions going on all the time, so that could be quite readily monitored, because emissions seems to be the issue that is of most concern to you?
Yeah, I suppose the issue is by the time it's actually developed, it's too late. So if there are issues with emissions, the facility is already there And I suppose it's a very costly exercise as well for the applicant to build it and then find that it is exceeding those emissions and having to put something else in place.
Well,
So I think it's more looking at the modelling, I think, is the key thing for the first step, to see if it is actually going to meet those guidelines on those hourly operation hours and seasonal basis.
I think I understood from Ms Johnston that that's been done and that the facility is not going to exceed any of the emissions guidelines established by the EPA. Is that correct, Ms Johnston?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you. And Ms Bisson, your response?
My response, that we're able to put conditions of consent that require them to do ongoing monitoring, and we're able to give conditions of consent that, you know, they can report that back to council or to able to present that monitoring should there be a complaint or an investigation into their operation. Yes.
Mr. Pearce has his hand up, so I'll just throw to him. It looks like he wants to add to the response as well.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'd just like to do a slight rebuttal to the EPL issue. I think in the air quality report, I'm pretty sure they talk about, on average, there's a 13 to 15 kilograms per animal, and then you add that up, and they say approximately 600 kilograms may be cremated per day. I think the issue here is that the theoretical peak is 850 kilograms. So if you take the 600 kilograms and you average that out over the year, it comes to about 170 tons, which is under the EPL. But I think that's not taking into account the worst case scenario. And I think the applicant was saying about 150 kilos an hour. And if you add that up over 10 hours, you're reaching the 850 kilogram maximum for that cremator, I guess. And if you do the 850 kilos times 52 by whatever days and the hours, then you are over that 200 ton threshold. So I think that just needs to be looked at a little bit more. And I did that in my submission, I guess. So thanks.
Am I able to comment at this point?
Please, briefly.
There's no way that we would cremate 850. I mean, pets go from a maximum 75 kilos down to 2 kilos. The mix is we start with larger pets and then we go to smaller pets as the cremator heats up. There's just no way we would go anywhere near those sort of numbers. It's just not, you just don't get all Great Danes. It's just not how it is. I mean, we cremate guinea pigs and budgies and chickens. It just doesn't happen in the real world.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. One of my concerns, and I look forward to reading some of these submissions. I must admit, I haven't read them all yet. One of my concerns relates to the management of the air quality, which one of the suggestions is the visual monitoring of emissions. And of course, the two major pollutants that have been identified by the objectors, PM10 and PM2.5, both invisible. So when I consider, when the applicant says that they haven't had any obvious emissions, I believe that a genuine statement. But I think in terms of the emissions that we're talking about, carbon monoxide, PM2.5, PM10, they're not something that's going to be identified through a visual monitoring. So I wondered if you might speak to the adequacy of those management techniques in the management plan.
So first of all, the air quality management or the air quality assessment report identifies that the emissions will meet the criteria. So the requirement for kind of visual monitoring is not so much about whether or not that can measure exceedance, because the modelling that has been done demonstrates that the criteria has been or will be met. The visual monitoring is really about maintenance and management on an ongoing basis. So that is one technique, in addition to regular maintenance of machinery, daily, weekly, monthly and yearly management and operational criteria being met. And all of those things are set out in the proponent's equality management plan, which has been submitted to council. There's of course opportunity for council as the regulator to condition in addition to those management criteria that have been proposed.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Just a final check, are there any further questions? Councillor Robinson. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Tom, this is to Tom and to Alison. So to Tom, as a 25-year resident of Warrabrook, when this come before me, I come hunting for you. I was hoping to find some dirt on Tom. Well, as a businessman and a human being, I've heard nothing but remarkable, honourable things about you, Tom, and the way you run business. I have two friends in Gold Coast that even commented about what you've got there. And so I can't find anything against you or the way you run business. I've done a bit of research into the cremator that you have, state of the art. And to Alison, what may cause an uncontrolled emission event here with this crematorium?
Yeah, so uncontrolled emissions can cause by, as Tom had mentioned about overheating, but it's critical that these things are operated correctly. So overheating can occur when you put the, well, basically it gets to a certain temperature, and if you put a body or a material in it that causes excess generation of heat, so fats in essence will generate and increase the temperature of the cremator, that's when things can go wrong. And we have heard evidence from people that have worked near a crematorium outside of the LGA. And when it goes wrong badly. There's bits of material that come flying down, there's dust, and it's really unpleasant. One of the other things is that we are concerned with is that they talk about mementos and things like that being burnt with the pets. This hasn't really been adequately assessed in the air quality report because you can't actually control, there's nothing to control what's actually going in with that pet. And that can actually cause, again, high temperatures, which will generate emissions and also create toxins as well.
Can I just answer that? We do not go overheat. It can't go overheat. The machine shuts down automatically. If the afterburner can't keep up with emissions, it immediately shuts down the primary burners and lowers the temperature. Every bag is opened. Every bag with a pet is opened prior to cremation to identify what is in the bag.
Yeah, right.
Okay, every bag, because we do paw prints and we do food samples for people. So we have to also cross-check to make sure that we have a stainless steel tag system, which is attached to the dog's leg or cat's leg, that we cross-reference with our paperwork to ensure that the pet we're cremating is actually that pet. Because we have, believe it or not, had vets put the wrong pet in and put the wrong paperwork on. And what said it was a Jack Russell was not a Jack Russell. So then we go back and check things because we guarantee that the dog or cat that comes in for cremation is the one that you get back.
Thank you. On that note, we will wrap up this session. I appreciate the presentations that we've received from both objectors and the applicants. All of the information you provided tonight will be taken into consideration as part of the officer's report when it comes to the elected council. So thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our second DA councillors, which is DA 2018/01331, 15 Duncan Close, Elmore Vale. And we're to hear from objector Judy Hodges and DA applicant Dwayne Ellis from the Sterling Property Group. Just give councillor services a moment to admit Judy and Dwayne to the session.
Deputy Lord Mayor, I omitted to declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest in that I live in the same suburb, but not near the development.
No problem. Thanks, Councillor Elliott.
Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor Declan, can you hear me?
You're off mute. Please go ahead.
I should have probably declared a non-pecuniary conflict with living at Warrabrook, also.
For the last item, no problem. We'll have that recorded as well.
Sorry.
Thank you. Councillors, so following the same format, we now have the opportunity for 10 minutes of presentation from Ms Hodges and 10 minutes from Mr Ellis, and then the opportunity for questions. So I'll hand over to Ms Hodges now.
Hello, good evening, Lord Mayor, councillors. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Oh, good. My name is Judith Hodges and I've enjoyed living at 37 Max Street, Elmore Vale for over 46 years. My neighbours have resided here for almost 50 years. I've raised 5 children in our quiet suburb. The fact that I'm the only speaker does not reflect on the community's interest. Most of us are not public speakers and don't Zoom. My home is the first house in Max Street as you enter or exit the proposed development of 15 Duncan Close, Elmore Vale. I would like to state that I'm not against the development by Sterling Property Group, as it will provide homes, jobs and boost the local economy. But I have one major concern plus a few other issues. While the development is listed as 15 Duncan Close, that street will remain a dead end. And all traffic will feed in and out of Max Street as the proposal is now. A photograph number 9 in a report that was provided by Intersect Traffic for the Sterling Property Group, dated November 28, shows a view of Max Street that is not a true indication of the amount of vehicles usually parked in the street. Possibly it was taken in the middle of the day. The 90-degree bend in Max Street is already a problem when vehicles are parked either side. Most occupants park their overflow vehicles on each side of the road as Max Street continues to the intersection of Kerry Avenue, and legally so. Even now, we depend on the courteous driving of all to safely negotiate the street. We pull over and let others pass. The park at the corner of Duncan Close and Max Street, which extends along the 90-degree bend, is the only visual and reasonably safe place for kids to play and kick a ball. Increased traffic, especially from the large vehicles associated with any development, puts our children at risk. Emergency services would be impacted as well. The Intersect Traffic report stated that the intersection of Max Street, Kerry Avenue and Sherrill Close is a safe intersection with no bus service, and I agree. But I do believe that the intersection of Kerry Avenue and Watkins Road is more dangerous, especially at school pickup time. Turning out of Kerry Avenue onto Watkins Road is hard at this time. Cars are parked on either side to collect their children, buses are dropping off children, and it makes visibility very hard. Any extra traffic will exacerbate the problem. The development of townhouses at 28 Watkins Road will add another entrance exit onto the Watkins Road, and that's directly opposite Kerry Avenue. Many discussions with neighbours and community members have always ended with one solution to us anyway, and that is an alternative vehicular access. Ever since we moved to Elmore Vale, people have talked about the extension of Max Street to Cardiff Road. I guess that's why we'll call the street, not a close. Continuing Max Street to access onto Cardiff Road would provide this alternative. Exiting onto Cardiff Road would be a left turn only, and entering would be a left turn only as well. This would eliminate any dangerous right turns across oncoming traffic. The community hall on Cardiff Road has a fenced yard for safety, and the council already maintains the access road to the hall. That access road to the hall would become a part of the new access road to the development. Further safety measures such as a lower speed limit and a stop sign could be used. The so-called designated parkland between the development and Cardiff Road is woefully underutilised. And if anything, a road and associated lighting would inhibit ongoing illegal dumping of rubbish and unsavoury activities. We might even qualify for a children's play area with actual equipment, would be really great. I'm sure the developer will cite costs to argue against the alternative access, but a benefit to them would be easier access for the large machinery and tradies used in the development. It would also be a selling point, and there would be less opposition from the existing community. There would probably be gratitude instead. For the Sterling Property Group, we would be interested in the estimated time frame to complete the development. And if there is no alternative access, where will all the trade vehicles park while the development is underway? This is a concern because whilst the collection of our garbage is not your problem, we're already experiencing issues with the red bin collection. The collector regularly forgets to reverse and pick up the bin. I feel the extra traffic, if we don't have an alternative route, is just going to make this a lot harder. Like I said, it's not their issue, but it's very annoying and frustrating for us. Also, what guarantees will the homeowners directly impacted by the development have to rectify any damage that might or might not be caused? And also like things like airborne dirt and dust from all the excavations, etc. I'm not going to utilise the full 10 minutes because basically I've looked into all their reports and everything is legal, and that it's more, the traffic is the biggest issue and the alternative access would be just a great thing. So I sincerely hope that the Newcastle City Council will carefully consider the advantages and alternative vehicular access will provide for our community's lifestyle and safety. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your presentation. If you could stick around for this next part,
Sure.
we'll throw to you for questions towards the end. I'd now like to invite Dwayne Ellis to present on behalf of the Sterling Property Group. Mr. Ellis, it looks like you might be on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and local residents, my name is Dwayne Ellis. I am Director of Sterling Property Group, the applicant and owner of the land. By way of background, I have recently completed the Cove Village at Fullerton Cove, which is a 209-unit, small lot, community title, seniors living village, which adjoins the Newcastle local government area. The Cove Village is considered by many to be the premier seniors living village in the Lower Hunter region. I mention the Cove Village not only as an indication of the quality of development we produce, but also because we have had a number of purchases at the Cove Village from the Elmore Vale and Wallsend areas. These purchasers would have preferred to remain in their local communities. However, they were unable to find suitable single-storey, small lot, community title housing in the Elmore Vale and Wallsend areas. The proposal before council is single-storey, small lot, low maintenance, community title housing. Our target market for the proposal is downsizers looking to remain connected in their local communities and be close to the services they require, including the John Hunter Hospital. We acknowledge that the existing housing surrounding the site is predominantly single-storey. To fit within this context, the proposal before council is all single-storey, has less than half the allowable floor space ratio, and is more than 3 metres below the allowable height limit. The proposal exceeds council requirements for private open space, communal open space, landscaped area, deep soil planting, and car parking. Central to the proposal is the landscape communal open space. The communal open space will contain the above ground remains of the Jubilee shaft, together with a pergola, barbecue and seating. The heritage listed sandstone and brick remains of the Jubilee shaft date back to 1887 and will be preserved in the communal open space. Interpretation panels for the remains will also be provided. The proposal includes a new concrete footpath through the adjoining council park to connect the end of Mac Street to the bus stops in Cardiff Road. This new public infrastructure will be available not only to the new residents, but also to the existing residents in Kerry Avenue, Duncan Close and Mac Street. The proposal is consistent with Council's housing policies and is permissible within the residential zoning of the site. I commend the proposal to Council and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I will just wait a moment for us to invite Ms. Hodges back and then ask if councillors have any questions, could they please raise their hand or put it in the chat?
Is that right?
Councillor Church.
This might be an opportunity for the applicant to answer the specific questions around traffic that was raised by Mrs. Hodges. He touched on it, but it might be nice just to flesh out whether there's any possibility to meet the residents' concerns.
Look, the existing pavements in Kerry Avenue, Duncan Close and Mac Street are 9.14 metres wide, which is the old 50 feet. Council's policy for road widths in part 7.04 of movement networks in the Development Control Plan 2012 require a pavement of 8 metres for this type of development. So what exists there is over and above what Council's current standards are.
I think there were specific questions about whether the road could be extended, about your building time and where tradies would park during the construction process.
Tradies would be able to park on site. There would be no need for tradies to park on external streets during construction. The site is big enough to predominantly have tradies park on site. In terms of additional access, we don't own any other land that adjoins Cardiff Road. We propose to build a footpath through the park, but we actually don't own land to build a road through there, and I don't think it's part of the plan of management for that park to have a public road through the park.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? There've been none. Thank you very much, Ms. Hodges and Mr. Ellis, for your presentations. We appreciate your time and we'll certainly take your views into consideration when this matter comes to council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. We are right on time. So the next item for public voice this evening is DA 2020/00044 for 304/464 King Street, Newcastle West. There's only one presenter registered this evening, and that is objector Mr. Warwick Miller. So just take a moment to welcome Mr. Miller and invite him to provide a presentation to council. Mr. Miller, it looks like you might be on mute.
I'm unmuted, correct?
Welcome.
Thank you. So you have the PowerPoint.
that's just started. So we're ready when you are.
Okay, so I'm Warwick Miller. I'm a resident in the Verve at 466 King Street. And this is my objection to the DA that's been submitted. Can we go up? Just a picture of the Verve sitting between 464 and 470 King Street, Newcastle West. Go up again. Verve Residences is a mixed-use development located between 464 and 470 King Street, Newcastle West. Within Verve, there are 2 strata plans of subdivision. 209-lot residential strata plan, SP 99314, and the 5-lot commercial strata plan, SP 99313. Verve was approved under DA 2016-00346, and construction was completed last year. Verve recently won the Aaron Bollett Award for Residential Architecture, Multi-Res Housing in New South Wales, and it won the Blackett Prize, which is the Regional Architecture Prize in the 2020 New South Wales Architecture Awards. It also won the Newcastle Medal, and it won the Multi-Res Award for Architecture in the Hunter region. The design brief for Verve was to create a development which encouraged interaction between its residents. And as a resident there, I can state that this has been achieved, and Verve has become a village and sanctuary for its residents. Verve was never designed for or intended to operate as a building for short stay accommodation. DA 2020000044 is seeking a change of use. That's the unit number 304/464 King Street, lot 9. And it's seeking a change in use from residential to a serviced apartment use. I contend that the proposed change of use to serviced apartment is not within the original design intent and approved DA for the development, and is totally incompatible with the completed development and its residents. I request that the council refuses DA 2020/00044. Go up. Any use of lot 9 as a serviced apartment will also require the use of the common property in SP 99314 so that short-term residents can access the lot as car parking, lifts, corridors, foyers, etc. In this case, the owner of the land is deemed to be the Owners Corporation of SP 99314. The applicant for this DA 2020/00044 did not seek the consent of the Owners Corporation when submitting the application. In point of fact, we believe that the application should have been refused on this basis. And it's noted that the actual Strata Corporation submitted a detailed objection to the council, including these reasons during the public notification period. The registered bylaws for SP 9934 have recently been amended to encapsulate the amendments to the New South Wales Strata Schemes Management Act 2015, which doesn't allow short-term rental accommodation. That's defined as any period less than 12 weeks. Our bylaw 6.4, as amended, prevents an owner of a lot in SP 99314 from renting his apartment for short-term rental accommodation unless it is their principal place of residence. Bylaw 6.4, as amended, also limits the maximum number of occupants in short-term rental arrangements to 2 adults per bedroom. Lot 9 is a 1-bedroom apartment. This DA should be refused because the use of Lot 9 for short-term accommodation will contravene our bylaw 6.4. Section 4.15 of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 203 requires that social and economic impacts be considered in any assessment of a development application. Over the past year, there have been numerous incidents of antisocial and malicious behaviour directly related to short-term tenants staying in Verve. Some of these incidents required police intervention. I actually had a mountain bike of mine stolen in one of these incidents. Short-term tenants have no connection or sense of community and no responsibility to the property they're staying in. They're only there for a short period of time and leave any issues behind when they leave. Verve is a residential development, and as such, it does not have the capacity or resources to address these incidents of antisocial and malicious behaviour, and can have a long and lasting impact on long-term residents. Motels and managed apartments are designed from the outset to have an operational structure that allows them to monitor and manage the behaviour of short-term tenants. They have facilities and policies and procedures in place to properly manage and deal with any of the issues of noise and antisocial behaviour, including the fact that these places all have 24-hour staffing on site. Within a 500-metre radius of Verve, there are many options for short-term accommodation. The Quest at Newcastle, 65 rooms, serviced apartments. The Quest at Newcastle West, 78 rooms, serviced apartments. Travelodge Newcastle, which is adjacent to Verve, has 131 rooms. Ibis Newcastle, just around the corner in Hunter Street, has 98 rooms, and the new Holiday Inn Express, adjacent to the or opposite the council chambers, has 170 rooms. Verve is not an appropriate setting for a serviced apartment, and DA 2020-00044 should be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Councillors, I'll invite you to ask any questions of Mr. Miller. Councillor Elliott.
Perhaps I could ask a question of Ms. Bisson. I'm not quite sure why we're getting a development application for something where the body corporate or the owner's corporation has deemed it not permissible. Is there a reason for this? Could someone clarify for me?
Through you, Councillor Clausen. Councillor Elliott, the advice that we have received is the owner's consent, being the owner's corporation, was required if there was works being completed outside the unit, as there were not. We were not required to get the owner's consent in that regard. With regard to the bylaws, it's not a relevant head of consideration with regard to planning legislation. So the bylaws may not permit it. However, that's not a consideration that we take into consideration in accordance with the EP&A Act.
Thanks, Ms. Bisson. Just a quick follow-up question. Just hypothetically, should this development be approved, given the status of the bylaws, would that prevent the applicant from being able to act upon the approval?
Correct. That's our understanding.
Thanks. Councillor Elliott, did you have any further questions? No. Councillor Church.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. To Ms. Bisson or Mr. Miller, has the applicant indicated why they're proceeding? I understand that the other applicant that came before us last month has now withdrawn.
Yeah, I'll let you know what I know, and then Warwick may have further information. However, we've made numerous attempts to contact the applicant and seek their decision on how they wanted to proceed with this application. And the last response that we received is they wanted to continue with the application and that they were seeking advice.
And my only comment to that is that the previous answer given about what will happen, I mean, you may approve it, but it certainly won't be able to happen because our bylaw will stop them from doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Any further questions, councillors? There being none, well, thank you very much, Mr. Miller, for your time, and again, take your views into consideration as part of the assessment of this development. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Councillors, the final presentation for public voice this evening is a development that we're all quite familiar with, DA 2019/01146. I've just had a message from Councillor Services, however, that because we're running a little ahead of time, they're having difficulty getting one of the speakers onto the Zoom. So what I might suggest, just given we're running slightly ahead of time, is a very brief recess, just so there's an opportunity to contact the objector and give them the opportunity to join the Zoom. So could I have a motion to that effect, please, councillors? Moved by Councillor Luke, second by Councillor Ruffo. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes, so at 7:15 p.m. Thank you, councillors. I've just got a message from Council Services to say that all of our presenters are with us. So with your consent, we might reconvene the meeting. I'd ask Council Services to admit the presenters to the meeting, please. So councillors, as I was saying before, this is presentation number 4 for DA 2019/01146 for 106 Gosford Road, Adamstown. We have presentations from 2 objectors, Ms. Mazzy and Ms. Brand, and from the DA applicant, Mr. Farr. So without further ado, I might hand over to Ms. Mazzy.
Good evening, everyone. I actually have to ask before we begin, which plans am I supposed to be speaking about tonight? Plans 3 or the plans that the developer has sent to the council and to myself and a few other people? Can anyone address that?
Let's speak to the plans that are in the public voice agenda, unless Ms. Bisson has anything further to add.
Okay, so as long as the planner is not bringing up any other plans in this meeting.
The plans before us are the plans on the public voice agenda. So if you keep your comments to them, I'll make sure that the applicant is also relevant to those.
Okay, terrific. That's just what I wanted to clarify. So regarding the plans for the 3-story units, I think the 57 letters that were sent into the city speak quite clearly how the community is against this. In particular, though, there were some aspects to it that the planner in the review for the meeting notes for the city didn't actually quite get right. So one of the things that was interesting was that even though the height of this development has been shrunk, the setbacks are actually not meeting the Newcastle control plan. So the setbacks have been increased to 3 meters, but in the context of a story of a building that's over 8.5 meters, it's a minimum of a 6-meter setback from the side and from the rear. And additionally, in addition to that 6 meters, if there are units facing a house, as in the case for these units facing 106 or 104 Gosford Road, it needs to be greater than 6 meters. So it's absolutely, even though it was increased to 3 meters, that's still 50% of what the minimum setback is by the city's own thing. One of the other things that was not addressed that was actually in multiple letters had to do with where all the garbage, all the rubbish is going to go. So when you have 12 units and you have all 2 sets of rubbish bins every single week going out, that's going to have a significant impact on the street and the streetscape, and where are those rubbish bins during the normal time. So I think those were some things that were not in the notes that had been sent out or were part of the development action process tonight. And I just wanted to raise those as they had not been raised as well. I think the biggest concern from speaking to neighbors and to speaking even with the developer is that it's interesting. In some ways, he managed to unite the community against the developments. Like we've had, I'm pretty sure this was more letters against the development than possibly anything the city has seen in years. And simultaneously, there is an absolute sense of fear now within the community because of these multiple plans that are put forth, to the point that other people are sending emails that they're afraid that if they say anything against any of the development that the developer proposes, he'll just go back to his original plans and put up whatever he feels like. And so in that sense, it's quite disheartening to watch what's happening, because we don't really know what's happening. And there's a serious sense of distrust coming up and being built around how this development is moving forward. For example, there are now rumors that these new plans are going to be voted on within a few weeks, right? So the plans that have not even been officially submitted to the city are going to be what's upcoming for a vote, and that no one will have any right to say anything about that. And that these plans that we're discussing tonight will never even be voted on, that they're just going to get wiped away altogether. In terms of some other aspects that did not fit and also that were not brought up is the driveway. How 20 plus cars are going to turn around in that driveway and not, again, if you look at what the development plans or the Newcastle control plan says, you have to have a driveway that acts as a street in some respects, and it cannot impact in a major way. It cannot impact the amenities, and it cannot increase pollution. Well, you can't have a driveway that's only 6 meters wide with 20 cars coming and going at all hours and then not have a significant impact on the pollution when you only have this space. That's basic physics and airflow. You're definitely going to have an increase in sound pollution and air pollution as well. So that was something else that was raised in multiple letters that did not make it into the meeting notes for tonight or into the recommendations for the council. I think, as I said, basically that's where we're standing now. We're happy to continue to work with the developer. One of the questions that I would also like to raise is, given the amount of community dislike, I suppose, of this development and the numerous times it's being sent back, why this development hasn't been sent to the urban design consultative group, right? One of which is, it can be recommended that a development goes to them if there are multiple dwelling developments comprising 6 or more dwellings. Like this was actually the first time the developer came to the community and spoke with anybody. And so now we're actually making progress in what is desired within the community and what could move the community forward, but we don't actually know what the actual process is going to be. And so that's what I would really like the council to talk about, is what's happening next. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brand?
Yes, can you hear me?
Did you have anything to add?
Well, it's kind of similar to what Gothia said, but I agree with the garbage bins. 24 new garbage bins in our street, in our block, is just not going to work. People park on the street in our street because they have no access to a driveway or a garage. And that means that any overflow from the development is going to impact all the way along Gosford Road. I do also have an objection to the fact that the building has no architectural elegance, style or merit. To me, it looks like 2 prison blocks that have been dumped on this land, and another version of these plans, it looks like a bunker is being built for the start of World War III. Our Gosford Road is a community that is older style houses, and this development has absolutely no sympathy what's already in Gosford Road. And the fact that it's going to be 3 stories is going to absolutely shatter the skyline. And I don't think anybody's going to be happy about that, because we've put so many objections in. Another point is, if anybody's trying to save bills on electricity because it's 3 stories high, nobody is going to, the surrounding yards aren't going to get sunshine, especially in winter. And now, so that means that any environmentally friendly trying or saving on electricity is just going to be negated. And my other point is that on this property, there is 2 beautiful trees. They're mature trees. They're apparently going to be obliterated and replaced by a poplar that it will take years and years to develop. Even then, it won't give you any shade. And at the moment, it looks like a blip on the horizon. Thank you for listening and your time and listening to my objections.
Thank you very much. I'd now invite Mr. Farr to present as the applicant's representative.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, councillors and members of the community. My name's Nathan Farr. I'm a designer from the Plan Centre. You may recall that I spoke on behalf of the applicant in the previous public voice meeting relating to this development in March of this year. At that meeting, several areas of concern that had been raised by members of the community, including height of buildings in relation to local character, density, visual impact upon the streetscape, privacy, landscaping, and loss of established trees, was discussed. At the previous public voice, I outlined that the location of the proposed development has been identified by council in several planning documents as an area of renewal and substantial growth, with a desire for increased residential density central to the objectives for the area. I also note that at the time of the previous public voice, the proposed development had the support of council's planning department and had been recommended for approval without modification. Regardless of the above factors, the applicant has consulted with the community in regards to their concerns and in response has made several modifications to the proposed development. This has included reduction of the streetscape presentation from 3 stories to 2, an increase in the amount of landscaping available on site, retention of existing trees where feasible to do so, and upgraded privacy measures. The current version of the development, which was most recently submitted for further assessment and public notification and has been discussed by the 2 previous speakers, was fully compliant with the objectives and controls of the local planning strategy, local environment plan, and development control plan for Newcastle. Despite this, the applicant has continued to respond to concerns. Following a very positive community meeting that was held on Saturday, 11th of July, which I know Ms Massey did not attend, we prepared and distributed to neighbours and councillors for discussion a preliminary design for a modified 10-dwelling, 2-storey development that we believe would address the remaining concerns and represents a happy medium that all parties can move forward with. Providing a consensus can be reached upon that model, it would be formally submitted to council for assessment as part of the ongoing application process. I would welcome any questions that councillors may have regarding that proposal and the ongoing discussions we've been having with the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would call for any questions from councillors to either the objectors or the applicant.
You're absolutely right. I did not attend that meeting. I have stayed away and have not written 5 million letters to the council, as I'm sure they have noticed since this started, because I wanted the rest of my community to be heard. And I think I speak for everyone at that meeting that yes, that was definite progress, having spoken with people that were at the meeting, but those plans have not been put forward to the city yet, right? Those are not official plans at this time. And as soon as those become official plans, then it actually becomes skin in the game for the developer. At this point, it's nothing. It's simply the plans that, that we're talking about now, the 3-story 2-unit, and it doesn't comply in all respects. For example, the setbacks don't comply, as well as the impact on the amenities of the neighbors definitely don't. Thank you.
Thank you. We have got a question from Councillor Elliott.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you both, all 3 of you, for your presentations. I understand that there has been quite a lot of discussion going on, and perhaps to clarify, it seems to me that the developer is trying to work with the community to identify clearly what the objections are, which is important, and then trying to address those. And you're right, Ms Massey, the plans that we have before us are not amended given the discussions that you've had, but I think that it sounds to me like there's goodwill for discussion. So I'm not sure why that's not getting to a resolution. So we only have the application in front of us to deal with that we have. That doesn't prohibit the developer from coming back and seeking amendments if that's something that they want to do. But the process, you asked about the process is we determine this application. Whatever the developer does is up to him. And we're in discussions between you and the developer, Mr. Farr, as productive as they can be, the better off you will all be at the end of the day, because you're better off to work together than ask the independent umpire to come down, because probably neither of you will like it. So I would encourage you to keep talking, and but we can only assess the application that's in front of us. If it gets approved, then the developer may or may not build it. But if you
could I just respond to that?
Sure.
The idea of the 10-dwelling 2-storey model was actually put forward by Miss Massey's parents. And since that was sent to them and Miss Massey for discussion, they have not been returning phone calls or engaging in that ongoing discussion, which we're looking for. So we can't really submit plans without getting that feedback. So we're seeking it now so that we can try and come up with something that everyone can be happy with.
I mean, I have to disagree in that you're CC'd on multiple emails to that. Maybe not you, but John.
All right, councillors, thank you. We'll just keep the conversation quite civil. Maybe a very direct question to Ms Massey. In principle, are you supportive of the amended plans if they were to be lodged by Mr Farr for consideration as part of this development process?
So you're as I said to Mr Farr, and as I said to John as well, this is not about me, right? This is about 57 plus people who voted in on that. Am I personally, would I say these plans are great? No, because the boundary now between that building and my mother's house, right, is 1.5 meters. So that's going to have a huge impact on the amount of sun that they receive in their house, all of these different things. So yes, do things need to be adapted still? Absolutely. But to shrink it down, which is wonderful. Everybody is happy that this is starting to actually become
I'm sorry,
manageable.
but Ms. Massey, your comments about the setbacks are wrong. The setbacks are 3 meters from the boundary. The approved 2-story 8-dwelling development that your parents have indicated they're happy with has a 2-meter upper story setback to the boundary. So we're actually trying to improve the situation for
then it's my bad, because I can't see that on the drawing that was sent to me. So happy if there's a better drawing that shows 3 meters, I would love to see that.
No problem. It sounds like, and I will throw to other councillors for the opportunity to ask questions. It sounds like there needs to be a further conversation between both parties, and it sounds like that we are working in the direction of a compromise that will be suitable for all. I would encourage you to continue that conversation. This probably isn't the right forum for that to happen.
Can I ask a question, please?
You had your opportunity to speak. This is an opportunity for councillors to ask questions. I'll throw to Councillor Duncan.
Deputy Lord Mayor, thank you very much. I think there's been a lot of correspondence, certainly, that I've received about this DA over the last few months. I think there has perhaps also been a degree of misunderstanding, if not misinformation at times, but I just wanted to really emphasise your comments that for the proponent and the objectors to be able to work together on this to continue to seek a decent compromise is really important. Councillor Elliott, I think it was, raised the thought of the independent umpire being the Land Environment Court coming in. And certainly from some of the correspondence that I have been seeing going back and forth, I think some of the residents have felt that they were being pushed to support this, to agree to the latest proposal, whether I think that's the 10 units and only 2 stories. And I'm concerned about that perhaps being used as a wedge to disturb or potentially to scare some of the residents. I think taking a step back from this at this point for everybody is really important, because I know for me to try and stay on top of everybody's concerns, and Ms. Massey is quite right. You know, I have 50-something objectors who have emailed me, and I don't want to see this discussion that should hopefully come to the ability to actually come to some agreement without that spectre of the Land and Environment Court coming in, because that goes no way towards delivering a great outcome for everybody involved, and that concerns me a great deal.
We get a meeting where we're on consensus.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Church.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Just a question to the applicant. Would you be prepared to lodge the revised plans and remove the existing plans from DA consideration?
We would, if there was an indication from residents that they were happy with that. Because at the moment we have a development that has the support of the council planners, and would, as Councillor Duncan said, if we did go to Land Environment Court over this, would most probably be approved. It's fully compliant with the planning controls. It meets the planning objectives. So the efforts that are being made by the applicant, that I'm a representative of, I'm not the actual applicant, but the efforts he's making are to try and make sure there is a compromise that everyone can be happy with, because he could quite easily go now to Land Environment Court, not worry about any of the neighbours' concerns, and most likely get a good outcome for himself. He doesn't have to do this. We had a really positive meeting on site with about 10, 15 neighbours. Kerry's shaking her head. Kerry actually said at the meeting that she would stand up and say here at the public voice that I like the 10 dwelling 2-storey option. So it's quite frustrating for us that we have been having these ongoing discussions, but then after we get feedback, it changes, as we've just been blindsided tonight by this.
Is there an opportunity for another meeting, do you think?
Potentially, but we do need a response from the neighbours. We had the meeting, we had very positive response. Everyone said, look, if you go and do that, we'll support it. So this is why we've brought it in front of the councillors and to have the discussion now.
I'm not going to waste another couple of months and
yeah,
10 units and they still blindsided.
Yeah, so this is the thing. We could put that in now for the 10 units and we'd still get the same objections we're getting now, because it doesn't really seem that whatever is being given by the developer is going to be good enough.
I think, Mr. Farr, at the moment, people might feel that they are being asked to discuss a hypothetical.
It's not really a hypothetical, Councillor Duncan. The developer could go tomorrow and lodge an application at Land Environment Court. So it's not really a hypothetical. The developer spent money to prepare the plans, to submit them, to circulate them to the neighbours and to the councillors. And we're looking for feedback from the councillors, from the neighbours, on whether this would be a happy compromise. But there's going to be a limit to how far. It started at 12 3-storey, it's now 10 2-storey. There is an existing approval for 8 2-storey that's not viable. So we're getting very close to that. So we're basically at the limit of where it could go. So from the developer's point of view, it's not worth submitting it for 10 dwellings at 2 stories if it's going to get further objections, and councillors are going to be reluctant because of the objections to vote in favour of.
Mr. Farr, I'm not sure why you would feel that it is not worth submitting that, given that that is one of the things that I'm sorry if the person who's sitting off camera with you feels that we are wasting your time. I'm certainly trying to get to a decent outcome for residents and for your client as well. But I think what the residents want to be able to do is actually comment on lodged plans, as you've expressed, the 10 residences over 2 stories. I think that is part of the problem, that they are being asked to give you an assurance on something that is not lodged with council.
We're not asking for an assurance. We're just asking for the same sort of feedback that we got on site when we had the community meeting, when everyone said, if you submit that, that's fine. Problem was, that was only a week ago. So we've distributed a brief mock-up of what's going to be submitted. But now we're actually getting this feedback that they probably will not support it. So from our point of view, we're trying to find some feedback, really. We're not getting feedback on that option. We did get feedback informally at the community meeting, but really it's the councillors that have got to vote, and they've got to listen to the community members, obviously, but also consider whether this development does meet the planning controls.
Thank you. Councillors, it's just one final opportunity if any other councillors have any questions in relation to this matter. It's pretty apparent, councillors, that we're not going to reach a resolution on this evening, although I would encourage the two parties to continue the conversation. And I would say thank you to Mr. Farr and to the applicant, because it is quite apparent that you have been prepared to negotiate and engage in conversation. Equally, I know this is a long process for objectors, so I appreciate their continued involvement. This is quite an unusual set of circumstances. Obviously, this came to council previously. This is before us this evening as a result of the matter being laid on the table in the Development Applications Committee. So as to try and reach a resolution on this, I might ask that Ms. Beeson reach out to both of you tomorrow and just assist in coordinating some form of final discussion so that we might be able to reach a resolution in terms of the plans to move forward on this item, if that's appropriate, Ms. Beeson.
Yes, that'll be fine, Councillor Clausen.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the three presenters for your time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Councillors, that closes the public voice meeting at 7:40, and I'll open the Development Applications Committee meeting at the same time. There are two matters before us. Firstly, I just again request a motion for apologies and leave of absence for the Lord Mayor. Do I have a move of that motion? Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Duncan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, declare the motion carried. And councillors, provide the opportunity for you to raise any declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest. I note that there's one from Councillor Rufo.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yes, it's in relation to item 22. I wish to declare a non-pecuniary significant conflict with this item due to my relationship with the objector, one of the objectors that spoke at Public Voice, Mr. Grujon. Mr. Grujon has generously donated to a charity group that I sit on and chair that raises money for breast cancer research. And so I'll be handling this conflict by removing myself from the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rufo. Would you mind just confirming which item that was for?
Item 22.
So the Linwood Street at Wickham?
That's right, DA 2017/0013.
Thank you. Councillors, I'll also declare a less than significant non-pecuniary interest in relation to that item. My mother-in-law owns property within the Linwood estate. It's a less than significant interest, and I'll be remaining in the chamber for the discussion on that item. I also have a notification from Councillor Luke.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll just declare a non-pecuniary less than significant conflict of interest in that I own a building in the Wickham area, but it's not actually that close to this property. And I don't believe it has any impact on this. So I think it is less than significant.
Thanks, Councillor Luke. Councillors, we now have, the next item is the confirmation of the minutes for the previous Development Application Committee, being the meeting held on the 16th of June. Do I have a mover of the minutes? Councillor Mackenzie, a seconder? Councillor Byrne, all those in favour, please raise your hand. All those against, I declare it carried. Councillors, the first DA on the agenda is DA 2018/00037 for 291 King Street, Newcastle. Councillors, do I have a mover of the recommendation? Councillor Church, a seconder? Councillor Robinson. Councillor Church, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is what history is, that this is an old council car park that's about to enjoy a new lease on life. What we're seeing here is a wonderful refurbishment of a building that will have multiple purposes: service departments, additional car parking, childcare centre, and some commercial space. I think this is great to see a developer taking this kind of positive approach, particularly in this COVID pandemic period. And I'm very grateful that the officers also agree that this particular development should be approved. I note that it is less than the approved DA which currently exists on the site.
Thank you, Councillor Church. Any further speakers? Councillor Mackenzie.
Just briefly, had a very close look at this one, particularly in light of some objections raised by Cooks Hill residents, in particular the traffic impacts for Lehman Street and then subsequent traffic impacts through the Cooks Hill residential area, and the consistency between that traffic generated by the changes to this site and the existing traffic management plan, and the expectations, I think, of Cooks Hill residents in general for in regards to traffic. Noting that there was a fairly high level of acceptance to traffic entering through that Lehman Street pathway, but they had raised a question as to whether or not there could be a possibility of an exit onto King Street, which would divert some of that evening traffic away from the residential area, which I think was a reasonable request. Having reviewed the traffic plans, I think it's quite clear that given the status of King Street as a classified road, it'd be very difficult for us to enable that to happen. And in fact, that given that there is the existence of an alternative, we could anticipate that Transport for New South Wales would be unlikely to consider that object. Also, just reviewing those plans and recognising that the traffic report that we have before us estimates a fairly limited amount of additional traffic, some 24 additional traffic movements through that Lehman Street, which is not enough, in my opinion, to warrant the either modification to the DA before us or to refusal. But notwithstanding, I think that there is, it's important to make sure that we are rigorous in the way that we assess those kinds of traffic impacts, particularly as they impact on residential developments. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Any further speakers? Councillors, I might speak briefly and also have a request for both the mover and the seconder. I'm very supportive of this application, was supportive when it originally came to council, and I think that this is actually a significant improvement on the original plans. The request relates to those original approved plans, which was DA 2016/01106. It's just a request. This hasn't been lodged as an amendment, but rather as a new development application. And so the request would be that we seek for the previous development application to be surrendered on the granting of consent for this development. Ms. Bisson has helped me this afternoon with some wording to bring about that effect. And so I've just put that in the chat, but essentially just adding to the motion that the development consent for the previous development application be surrendered, and that a notice of surrender is to be submitted within 28 days of this consent. And so I would seek support from the mover and the seconder, whether that could be incorporated into the motion.
No objection, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Just fabulous confirmation from Councillor Robinson. So that amendment gets added to the motion before us. Councillors, one last opportunity. Any further speakers? There being none. Councillor Church, would you like a right of reply?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Only to comment that I would urge the developer to start as soon as possible. This is very important for the city at this time. It would create commercial opportunities, but also construction and development jobs, and it'd be marvellous to see this investment happening sooner rather than later. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Church. Councillors, just immediately before we vote, and I know that I did ask for clarification. I just asked for clarification one last time. Councillor Services have just asked me to seek confirmation of Councillor Rufo's declaration and whether he was declaring an interest in this matter, just to confirm whether they need to put him in the waiting room for the vote.
Deputy Lord Mayor, it wasn't this item.
Fabulous.
Next item.
No problem. Terrific. Okay, councillors, I'll put this matter to a division. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Winnie Bartz, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Rufo, Councillor White, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Luke, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Church, Councillor Clausen. There were no votes against, so I'll declare that motion carried unanimously. Councillors, the second item before us is DA 2020/00136 for 76 Linwood Street, Wickham. I'll just wait a moment for Councillor Rufo to be added to the waiting room for that item. Councillors, do I have a mover of the officer's recommendation? Do I have a mover and Councillor Robinson? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Church, are you speaking, or are you going to second Councillor Robinson's motion?
Deputy Lord Mayor, I would like to put an alternate motion, and that is that this DA be approved.
No problem. Okay, so Councillor Robinson's motion has lapsed for lack of a seconder. Councillor Church, have you got a series of conditions of consent that you'd be proposing to move along with approval?
Yes, Deputy Lord Mayor, I'd like to suggest that we could use the very strong reasons, the 13 itemised reasons provided by the applicant on pages 45 and 46. They state very clearly the reasons why they believe the DA should be approved, and I concur with those reasons, and I'd be happy for those to be included in the motion as supporting documentation.
Okay, so I have a motion which is the applicant's paragraphs from the report, moved by Councillor Church. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Mackenzie. Councillors, I would just like to seek brief advice from Ms. Bisson. This is relatively unusual that we have an item from officers recommending refusal where a motion for approval is moved and we don't have a series of conditions of consent. I'd be a little uncomfortable with us moving ahead with approval this evening without those drafted. So I just might seek some advice from Ms. Bisson. My recommendation is perhaps that we lay this item on the table if that is the move of council. Ms. Bisson?
Through you, Councillor Clausen, we have drafted conditions of consent in preparation, I guess, if this was supported. So I can provide them, and if you wanted to take some time to read them, or you could lay it on the table. But there are some drafted that I could get through to everybody within a couple of minutes.
Councillors, I might suggest that we lay this item on the table, given that we have a Development Applications Committee meeting next Tuesday night. If that could be added to the agenda for that meeting, perhaps that would give the opportunity for that to be reviewed by councillors before the meeting. Was that a work for you, Ms. Bisson?
Yes, that'll be fine.
No problem. Can I have a motion to move to lay it on the table, please? Councillor Mackenzie, you seconded, but it sounds like Councillor Luke was supportive. Moved by Councillor Luke, seconded by Councillor Duncan. All those in favour, please raise your hand. I'll just do this by division as well. Supported by Councillor Winnie Bartz, Councillor Byrne, Councillor White, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Luke, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Church and Councillor Clausen. Votes against, Councillor Robinson. I'll declare that motion carried. So that item's been laid on the table. That concludes Development Applications Committee meeting for this evening. There are workshops to convene shortly. So thank you very much for your attendance, Councillor.